Whether it be a young African-American man being gunned down by a neighborhood watchman in Sanford, Florida, or a 23-year-old woman from India being gang raped aboard a bus, or a seemingly well-intelligent young white man walking into a crowded theater killing innocent movie patrons, or whether it be the worst, terrorists from the other side of the world attacking America on our own soil. The one thing that connects every last one of these events is that they were all violent. As much as we try to disconnect the circumstances surrounding all of these occurrences in our nation and around the world, no matter what, there is always the one thing that connects them all. But what is it? What is that one thing that connects them all? And can anything be done to stop these horrific acts of violence? What are the warning signs for the individuals who carry out these violent acts? With the diverse panel of professionals educated from institutions across the nation, these are the questions that we plan to answer. We welcome you to our special broadcast this evening, The State of Violence, a Call to Action. We want to welcome our viewers from right here in the state of Alabama, across the United States, and around the world. I'm Ed Moore III, and this is WLJS News. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ed Moore III. Thank you for joining us here on 91.9 FM, WLJS Jacksonville, here on this Sunday, January the 27th, 2013. It is 7 o'clock p.m. here in the state of Alabama Central Time, 8 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast. We thank you so much for joining us on our broadcast this evening. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be discussing the trend of violence and why does violence occur and the ways to circumvent, to stop, or to diminish violence. We're going to be discussing a series of violent occurrences that have happened in our nation's history, some as recent as last week, and some as long ago as 15 years. Some of these incidences may ring a bell to you all. The Columbine High School massacre, Virginia Tech, the Wisconsin Sikh temple shooting, Aurora, Colorado, Sandy Hook, Florida A&M, Rodney King, 1998 Westside Middle School shooting, Trayvon Martin, Chicago, Illinois, India rape crisis, and the Lone Star College shooting near Houston, Texas. America has been extremely concerned with the future of this great nation of which we live in. And more importantly, we want to come together as a nation and figure out what is it that we can do to help stop these horrific acts that have been plaguing our nation. I have a great, wonderful panel of professionals who are not only educators here in the state of Alabama, but professionals from around the world. I would like to introduce Dr. Tim Barnett. Dr. Tim Barnett has his PhD in political science. He's graduated from the University of Kansas, and he specializes in governmental management as well as leadership organizational behavior. I would also like to welcome Dr. Erin Ryder. She has her PhD in sociology from the Texas Women's University, as well as a master's in women's studies from Texas University, and she has a background in gender studies from Eastern Oregon University. I would also like to welcome Julie Nix. She is a master's of social work from the University of Alabama, as well as a background in developmental disabilities, public health, medical social work, as well as child welfare. I would also like to introduce David E. Reddick, who is a city councilman here in the state of Alabama, as well as the Calhoun County, Alabama NAACP chapter president. I would also like to welcome Trace Fleming Smith, who is a women's rights activist, and she is also a sexual rights advisor. I would also like to welcome Mr. Michael Walker, who is the minister and motivational speaker for the Kingdom Place Ministries of Anniston, Alabama. I would also like to welcome Mr. Sean Creech, who is a social worker, child welfare expert, and he is also has background in Department of Human Resources Services here in the state of Alabama. Hello to you all, and thank you so much for being here. Also, I would also like to introduce Pastor Fred Smith, who is the head pastor for the Bridge Christian Center of Jacksonville, Alabama, where we are broadcasting from live worldwide. Hello to you all. Thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure. It is such a pleasure to have you all here. I want to go ahead and start off with the first series of shootings that have occurred within our nation, within the past couple of months, and really within the past 6 to 7 months. It seems that there has been this trend for month after month after month. It seems that no matter what, we are seeing that there is another shooting, and another shooting. One of the things that I think has really shaped our country to understand that these kind of conversations must be had, and they must be had in an educated, and they must be had in a very professional manner. Let's talk about one shooting, the Columbine High School massacre. I would like to bring up Julie Nix and Dr. Aaron Ryder, as well as Mr. Sean Creech. This was a shooting in which on April 20th, 1999, when 18-year-old Eric Harris and 17-year-old Dylan Klebold walked into their Colorado high school, murdering 12 students as well as a teacher. And it's interesting how a lot of people say that these were students who were bullied, and that these were students who were being taunted and who were being teased. It seems that now all of a sudden that was kind of the catalyst for shootings, school shootings in America. And now every single time we look up, we think that it is because that someone is being bullied, or they're being teased with, or they're being taunted with. Let me ask you, Dr. Aaron Ryder, do you think that really is truly what took place at Columbine High School? Do you really think that these young men were truly bullied, and that's why that they carried out this massacre? And do you think that is the reason why young people carry out these massacres at their schools?
Okay, from a sociology perspective, I think one thing we could look at in terms of the organization and these groups that are labeled as the victims that turn into perpetrators, there's something interesting that's going on with the definition of rampage shooting. It's usually that they have some attachment to the school. The school becomes symbolic as this public stage. And then it moves into this idea that they're targeting particular people that are either symbolic, or that there's multiple victims that are either at random or purposeful. In terms of a culture of violence, one thing that I would look at as a factor is that oftentimes we respond to levels of injustice with more violence, and that would be a concern from the sociology side of it, and how that's in our organizational culture or our culture of violence.
Let me ask you, Mr. Sean Creech. Sean Creech is a social worker. He's also worked with child welfare services, and he's had background in DHR services here in the state of Alabama. I know that when you go to a child's parents' home and you see the things that are taking place in this child's home, is there any particular behaviors that stand out and that say this child looks like they could be a school shooter?
It's nearly impossible to walk in and just based on seeing the child or their family and say, hey, this child's going to be a school shooter. But there are certain traits that can weigh into that. no two traits. It doesn't take two or three that would necessarily identify a child as being a school shooter, but there are some traits, and some of those warning signs that we should be aware of. In fact, is that 3/4 of the school shootings, somebody had information that the attack was about to occur, or had information that there was an attack being planned. And as far as the kids go, there's a lot of different behaviors that we can look at. None of them should necessarily be weighed any heavier than others, and we can also think that looking at some of these behaviors, hey, this applies to probably all of us at some point. So we have to weigh all those things. Look at, are they, a lot of these attacks are rarely thought out. Are rarely impulsive. They're always thought out, planned in advance. A lot of these kids don't lack values. They actually come from homes where they do have good values. It's just that those values include the acceptance of violence. Usually there's some personal loss within the year leading up to the attack, and that could be a divorce of parents, death of a family member, recent breakups, significant bullying at school, and fascination. Lots of fascination with murder, inappropriate video games, fascination with these mass killings that are going on almost to an obsessive level. And, we got to look at, are they, as far as their traits, are they able to feel empathy? Do they feel sorry about these things, or do they think it's funny? Do we, have we noticed any recent and sudden changes in their behavior, their grades, drug use? The list could go on and on.
One of the things too, also to everyone in here in the room that I noticed, and you said that there is an instance where someone had some kind of idea, or someone knew something about this particular person before they did it. During the Virginia Tech massacre, since we're on the subject of school shootings right now, and we're going to cover school shootings, and then we're going to cover other types of violence later on in the program. But one of the things about the Virginia Tech shooting, very famous poet and author Nikki Giovanni. She was a faculty member at the university, at Virginia Tech University, and the young man who killed 32 people on April 16th of 2007, Sung Hyu Cho, apparently he was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And poet and author Nikki Giovanni, he was in her class, and she says that he had a mean streak. And she says, quote, "I've taught crazy students and I've taught weird students. I've got to say, he alone was evil." She described later to a state panel investigating the shootings that Cho either sat silent in her creative writing class, or read his poems in a very low mumble that no one could hear, or when he was told to revise assignments, he defiantly turned them in unchanged. She says that she had to tell Cho every day to remove his reflective sunglasses, and she was offered security. Apparently that wasn't good enough. She even told the department head of the department that she was in that she told him to, quote, "Get this man out of my class or I will resign." Cho was eventually removed and tutored privately for the rest of the summer, and this took place in 2005, 2 years before the shooting incident took place. I want to direct this to Julie Nix, who works in counseling services. If she says that Nikki Giovanni apparently actually met this woman when I was about 5 years old, many moons ago. The fact that she was able to say, okay, something here is not right. Something about this kid is weird. For some reason, it seems like it's always that trend that all these school shooters, there's always something that, quote unquote, was not right. Or there was always something that, I knew something about that kid. But for some reason, it slips by the people who should be delegated and designated to handle these types of situations. And the individual gets their hands on a gun and they go kill numerous people. Is there really a truly way to, from a counseling perspective, intervene in situations where a kid is, quote unquote, not right?
Okay. That's a good question, Ed. And I think that, anyone can say, what's the saying, hindsight is 2020, and looking back at behaviors, and after there's an act of violence, people come forward and they have information, and there's the question of why didn't we see this. But since Virginia Tech, there's been a trend with college campuses across the country to institute policies and teams on college campuses that can help facilitate